So I think we started designing in 2017. I think we selected the architect in could be 20. Yeah. So 2016, 2017 is when we selected the architect, and then we had obviously our whole programming and then design process, and then construction started.
I'm going to pull together a map.
Oh, you give the actual date. That'll be so much helpful. So much more helpful than my memory.
No, we tested it wrong.
Yeah, I would rarely pass a test on that. So, but construction did take longer than we anticipated. We had originally planned on having the building open. Help me remember this, Gary. It was 21.
We thought we were going to be ready spring of 21,
right,
but we still were very much in COVID.
Yeah.
And so we were ready for first events fall of 21.
Right. I mean, it ended up not mattering because of COVID, but there were some delays in the project that slowed it down.
And
Never met him.
any big surprises through the construction process?
I wouldn't say big surprise, but it's new construction, so there aren't a whole lot of unforeseen conditions. There were some challenges, like with any design, there are challenges that you don't really find until you're in the construction. But unlike some projects way past, we weren't shooting for real bleeding edge cutting. I mean, I would say it's a cutting edge theater, but it isn't. There were no experimental technology.
Right.
So. I think some of the cutting edge type features are, and we've got that air conditioning that is underground. I mean, if you ever, I don't think we toured around that time, but it looked like a maze out there before the building went up because there were all these chases and everything underground where all of the air is running and it comes up below the seats. But then I think Carrie did describe I think Carrie did describe probably the most technologically advanced thing we have here, which is the acoustic system.
Yeah, the electronic acoustic.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just neat that they can do it. And there's an expense to that, but it allowed us also to keep the volume, I think, of the building down, or the spatial volume of the building down, and operate as a space that was significantly larger than that.
Did SMC have any specific things they really thought were important to have in the building and you couldn't have put in, or is it all pretty much resolved?
They were at all the meetings and they participated in the agreement.
Yeah, they didn't have any specific request. They liked what we were doing and saw practical use in all of them.
So good partners.
Yeah, very good partners. I mean, it's a highly flexible space. I mean, if you were building for, the LA Phil, you wouldn't build this space, but it's a space that can do a lot of different things. In between this space, the performance lab and the outdoor courtyard, all of it, it is built to do any number of events and activities, and really sort of hopefully be a real community benefit.
So you had FTE was April 3rd, 2019.
What about design? So 2019 when we started construction, what about design? Can you recall? So it'd be the HGA initial year.
Has SMC done anything in the building yet, or is there anticipation do you have anything?
They have one small event, nothing really huge yet. I mean, they're just getting back open, sort of, themselves, so they're not there. The Santa Monica Symphony has been here. That was a pretty good size.
What was the biggest event, probably the first biggest big event here?
Certainly the biggest. No, actually, I mean, we've had the fall concerts, so all the December concerts were in here, and those were pretty full with people. So we've had, I'm going to say probably 35, 40 events so far, which, is far less than we would expect to have had in a 6-month period. And then when we get up to speed, we'll probably do 75 to 80 every 6 months.
Do you think it's less than we would typically have because of COVID?
It's completely because of COVID.
Not because it's new and unknown.
No. No, it's all about that nobody's, yeah. I mean, you know, we've scheduled the grand opening 3 times and canceled it 3 times,
Is
so.
there one scheduled?
We're now talking about doing one at the end of September.
Yeah.
Just trying to figure out when the next time we cancel this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, and once we tried to get one in March, but in January, February, it felt not good. And as you can imagine, it takes months to plan such things. And there's no point of doing anything between spring break and the school year. That's way too busy.
I just have some feedback just as a user, because it is a wonderful space. I mean, you look at it for being a nutcracker, which we showed at the building stage. And so we were disappointed that there was not enough fly space, so we couldn't do our, so that I think will be an limitation. You know, but it's offset by lots of other things that didn't. And I also think it's kind of expensive. So I think you might have to relocate, replace it. So I know there's a lot more space than you do.
I'll look at that.
I took rented.
It's managed by our facility use department. So, you know, Jerry Gibson and his team, as they manage all of our facilities for outside use.
But it is, we were very impressed. We hope we can do something.
Yeah, you know, we.
And this is really a great space. This really is a selling point, I think, for any young who's been running the theater that they can use this for.
Yeah. One of the things, you know, we did have to compromise on was the full Fly Loft. That it would have necessarily added another almost 30 feet to the space. Height. Yeah, 30 feet of height just to get, you know, because if you're, you know, the proscenium opening is 40 foot by 32, and so you need minimum another 40 feet to fly out. So you're up, you need to be in with, you know, walking grid and everything above it. You're ending up being about 90 feet. And so right now we're about 60. So it makes a difference.
And I was curious, so since you don't have all that fly space, the projection system is really into rear projection.
No, we have front.
You only have front.
She's asking if there's a reason.
Oh, we can do rear.
You can't do rear?
Oh, yeah, we can do rear.
I heard that
We don't have a projector, but all you do is we bring in or rent a projector or bring in one of our others to do rear.
because that would, I mean, a lot of it is.
Yeah,
So
so
a
absolutely.
lot of projection.
Yeah.
And the rigging that we have works for the screen, right?
Right, yeah.
Nothing special we need for that.
No, it's a roll screen.
It just needs to be, something just needs to bring in.
Yeah, and if you bring in a screen, we can definitely hang a screen, you just can't fly it all the way out. And then from there, you can do rear projection, and just depending on your, we'll have to see, you know, the throw. It's not, you know, the nice thing is at Barnum Hall, we have the area right behind it.
Yeah.
And so we can put a projector and get enough throw to fill most of the back of a rear projection screen.
But not here.
It's not that, not as good.
March 2nd, 2017 for ARC.
So it was 2017 started.
Oh.
Thank you. Design 2019 started construction. That process was fine, we just had some delays during construction.
So what, I saw on the punch list that we've done, so what was the total final cost?
So, you knew that question was going to come up.
You don't
And, well, construction total cost, well, actually, we can probably switch it up. I was counting on Kevin being here to answer that question. Kevin got back from Italy today. I know. I'm like, I don't care if you're tired.
Knows it.
Yeah, toward the custody and your big gap.
But I think sure you'll be able to tell us the final.
Yeah, just on kind of what the budget was, because I had this code and this increase, yeah, just to kind of know.
Yeah, there were some, I mean, so the
The
initial budget that we talked about prior to getting commitment from SMC was one. I don't remember, but it was pretty small. And that was really just going to be to replace that, right? So we had 650 seats, just a standard theater, Nothing, didn't have the space, didn't have, I guess you must have had the music and choir. No, just
Choir. One.
And then we started talking about CMC, and we started saying, well, if we're going to do that, we should also probably do this, and create this space, for example. And then, of course, if we're going to do it, we probably should put in something like electronic acoustics. So the cost going into the project was higher than the initial budget. But, and then, there are change orders. In fact, I feel like we still have one change order coming somewhere around the house.
But it's only the second one for this.
There haven't been a lot.
No, it's been very minimal. I mean, we stayed pretty much within our contingency for this.
Yeah. But I don't think we've yet processed.
Yeah,
this.
I know that originally we were calling this shoveling and upgrades and things. I'm just saying from that was that I was doing, since you only had two changes, whatever that was anticipated.
Yeah.
Just where.
We'll get, on the way for sure did.
Yeah, and one of the main change orders was just adding in cameras and security systems that we were doing other places, but we hadn't incorporated that into the process.
And then I think that's the one where DSA.
Oh, this is also the one where, most of our security things we're doing without DSA approval because we don't think it's really necessary. But when we tried to add it into this one, the DSA inspector said, oh, that has to be DSA approved. Yeah, and it's sort of hard to see where it fits within DSA that it's required.
There was literally no logic that they could provide. They told me that it had to be in there. But, so I was talking to not just our DSA inspector, but the guy at DSA. And he said, yeah, it just has to be. Like, stop asking me questions, put it in there. So
They want the report.
they do. They get the fees for it and everything. But I mean, so we ended up pulling it out of this project
Or put it back after.
and doing something. So we did a change order to add it to the project, and then a deductive change order to take it out.
Yeah, to avoid the screw.
Well, we're still doing it, but I mean, yeah, it's got,
No, I understand.
yeah, it was basically to avoid this
It
project.
happens in the private world too.
Oh, I'm sure. Probably much better at it, but, anyway, so why don't we go on to the next thing and then,
February 18th, 21, we took Amendment 4 to the board to obtain a credit to the district. And at that time, resulted in a total GMP of $35,323,288 in.
so
I
then,
don't see a final one
it's not, in there.
and like the substantial.
We have one change order coming out, because I think it's in the $500,000 range, or at $500,000. It'll be in the 36 range.
But that was the last one.
Thank you.
Anything else on the building, or move on to the next one? The next was the approval of the minutes. Everybody should have on their passing the document. Anyone have any?
Did we approve the agenda?
Oh, we've not approved the agenda.
Oh, I was wrong.
That's great.
I told you I did that after the,
Yeah,
tour
sorry.
guide.
I skipped past.
We should probably do that first. and then-
Yes, okay,
Then-
so, does anyone have any comments or pages on the agenda or as the agenda?
We also request agenda items, future agenda items.
Yes. That's usually when we request that, yeah. So we have, going to approve the agenda. Okay. Any seconded? All in favor of approving the agenda? Okay. So now we are back to approval of the March 28th minutes. Does anyone have any comments or minutes?
I just saw a little typo on number 7. We had our, this is putting us in the year 2023, 2030.
20? 30?
Well,
Yes.
it's
Oh, got it, okay, got it.
We had gaps before.
That's far. Good catch. I didn't see that. Okay, so under number 7. That would be a really long time.
I do have one other comment on the 5A, on the discussion and fairly reviewing the roles and responsibilities, but then there were comments and questions, and there was, I think, one suggestion that maybe we want to embed in the minutes, which is a question of whether the frequency of reporting that could be done to the board. In other words, some sort of formalized review function that
Formal from the FDC.
from the FDC board. If that could be noted, I mean, it's part of the discussion. Right.
Just noting that there was a discussion regarding it, I think that's,
Okay, well, good, we should have decided that, and that might be agendized. Right.
yeah, I mean, there was no decision on this.
Well, not a decision, because there was a lot of discussion, and there was talk about having a future meeting where we would discuss this in more detail.
Okay, yeah, we can.
There's a future meeting now.
But you know, you already have it in here, Christine noted, you have to be at the meeting after next. So it's
Yes.
like, doing ed spec, oh, that was ed spec, right?
Yes.
But we also talked about trying to define our role a little bit, and so that we stay within. One of the things on that, with regards to that, is whether or not we have a written report to the board.
Right.
But this
Just a little more clarity, and that's maybe for agendized items.
Sure, I think probably Carrie and I can talk to the facility subcommittee,
Yeah.
next time we meet and get some suggestions from the board subcommittee and what they thought.
that's the goal. Okay. So we need to add that to the minutes, or we want to talk to that at the future meeting?
I don't have the minutes in front of me, does it reflect that we have that?
Well, there wasn't, yeah. Maybe a little small.
Yeah, so we can add a sentence that says that there will be a future discussion about FDAC reporting to the board. I mean, that's what we're getting at,
Right.
is what that.
That's perfect, yeah.
Good.
All right, I'd like to move that we approve the minutes of the March 28th meeting with the changes that we discussed. Second.
I'll say.
All those in favor? Okay. Then we move on to item staff report. We move on to staff.
And we don't have a separate report, no, it's just, we'd like to thank you all for accommodating and the green maximum. But I don't think we have a standing report.
All right, and we have a report from this design review subcommittee.
Really not. I think the only thing I would ask is, because we haven't met, but from Carrie and from Steve, has there been any meetings with the design team and any interaction with the historic consultants?
Yeah, the historic architects on these projects met with the architects.
Carrie, are we going to discuss this in our meeting?
Yeah, she's asking me a question.
But we can wait till later.
Okay.
I mean, the answer is yes, but it's already.
It's on the agenda.
Oh, it's on the agenda, fine, perfect.
But I think it raises a question, and maybe this is a Michael and Barbara question, which is it an appropriate time to reconvene with the design and review subcommittee?
I think what we're waiting for is the architects took away from the meeting with the historic architects things to work on and things to do, and where the next thing I'd like to see is that the architects bring that back to the historic architects, their solutions, and for the historic architects to go, okay,
And then
we bring the design review committee back in to review what it is.
That's pretty smart.
Yeah, because if if John Smith Barrow's attempt to fix it also says, no, that's completely.
Yeah.
I'd rather make sure we have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, then I think maybe we can ask Barbara and Michael to, when we get an idea of what that timeline would be, to reach out to our design review subcommittee members and just say, you know, it's coming in like 3 weeks, whatever it is.
That's good.
Then obviously set the meeting if we can. But let's just keep that communication going so they know what's coming.
Yeah, that, those make sense.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we're.
I think then we're on to your project updates discussion, and we start with the COVID impacts.
So, I mean, you guys have seen the COVID impacts. Obviously, I think it's been talked about significantly. But, Carrie, is there an update that you can get from the district's perspective? Just because remember we used this to talk just about COVID.
There really isn't. I mean, you know, in most situations, we have gone back to pre-COVID normal. And particularly that on a facilities end, that we have reduced the enhanced cleaning because the Department of Health has now allowed us not to have to do all that. We were spending substantial money every week on additional custodians and custodial support. So we pulled back, particularly was doing a lot of things that we all now know don't prevent COVID. But we are still maintaining the high level of ventilation in our spaces. And so that we know is the most important thing for reducing spread. But everything else is pretty much, has relaxed quite a bit. But we're maintaining our ventilation.
I know there was like a back order on a lot of ventilation type equipment. Has those things cleared through? Or?
They've cleared through. We had some particular hang up on getting enough MERV 13 filters. Those have been moved, and my understanding is they got installed over the break. And now we're looking at the next set of orders because we know we're going to have to do replacements for those in a couple months.
Carrie, so remember that MERV 13 filters need to be replaced more frequently than MERV 11?
Yeah. I mean, typically our MERV 13s will need a replacement. Well, we're seeing somewhere between 4 to 6 months, depending on the situation. Where your MERV 11s usually need an annual replacement. The MERV 9s, which we used to use, the MERV 11s would get it.
Okay, that's like 2 or 3 times a lot.
Yeah,
That's really what.
correct.
So I'm not sure about every classroom, but in most classrooms at San Diego, correct?
It's not in most, only a few.
Oh, okay.
The large ones. And
Not the really big ones, the ones that are just about, literally not from that floor, just here, like those.
yeah.
Like Honeywell units?
The Honeywells, they only should have those in a couple of spaces. And those are very specific.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think who would still need one in San Juan.
I don't know, like what if we have stacks of them? What do you do with our rooms?
Then
Place you can return them to?
you let me know, and we're storing them in the basement of Discovery.
Okay.
We have a whole lot of air filters.
eBay. These are
Well,
like private market.
Yeah, I'll take one.
These ones are private market ones.
Yeah, like the ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of those, but we also have the very large, industrial air scrubbers, which were those were a couple thousand. And we have
a lot.
we have about 400. We don't need them, but
Those are really big.
And they make a lot of noise. So now.
They're noisy, but
they're noisy, but they do.
they're effective.
They do it, and we have a number in place and staged in Malibu, because when the next time we have a nice fire, they're really great for smoke. But at the same time, we do have them. We're still using them in certain spaces that don't have very good exchanging. So like the first floor at Franklin, this is the air systems there do not have good exchanging. So we have them in the E building in Malibu, the two-story container building, because they use cartridge units as opposed to mini splits and cartridges, which don't have exchanging. So.
I'm curious about that. You started accumulating all this different equipment and all these rooms and how that's going to be out.
We're clearing them out, trying to get, because the goal is to have as much learning space in all the classrooms, so as much as possible, moving them out. And with our built-in HVAC systems, they're better, and also we're trying to get back to our sustainability goals. Yeah.
Yeah, because what is that, when you have the heat on, and then you have the windows open because it's
Not
okay.
good. And we've seen that in our sustainability, in our energy, tracking. We've really tracked how we're spending more money, and we spent more money in the fall on in a greater amount of energy use. Even though we did a whole lot of things to reduce our energy use, so we're really excited about getting.
Well, yeah, I mean, when it starts getting hot, you don't want people running air conditioning in the windows.
Well, for
They
right
wouldn't
now,
necessarily need to when the air conditioning's on, right?
they should not need to, and yet some people feel more comfortable in these days of COVID, and we're not going to be strict about that yet.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, the air systems that we have with the ionization is doing an almost too good a job taking away particulates from them.
How can you do two?
Filters that carry from it. One of the things that the ionization does is it negatively charges the particles.
Yeah.
Stick to the filter better. Filters are clogged up.
Oh, so we have.
So
Yeah, which causes a greater need to replace, which means we're capturing
a lot.
Can they be cleaned or you just have to toss them?
Awesome.
Because they're all paper filters.
Now you should have a lot less fluid too, in other things.
In theory,
In theory.
yes.
Okay, so, any else on the agenda? So Kevin,
So,
what is being done?
so one of the things that we're working on is, we in this committee, I think, in fact, raised the issue of the air conditioning vents at Rogers that were visible from the 16th. Everywhere.
Yeah.
14.
From every experience, but 14th Street was that side of the concern. And we now bid that project. We did that open street, do you recall? The Rogers.
HVAC and that's what it's on. That one just awarded,
I think it was the first meeting in March.
March or April, sorry.
No, I think it was, I thought it was, maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, it was an expensive solution. It wasn't the fanciest solution we come up with, but we wanted it in front of the school. We wanted it to look good. So we worked with the architect to come up with a good design. Now that's been awarded, that's moving forward. Another project, most of these projects have wrapped up. Another one though that we do want to update is Smash Mirror. And our contractor there has been working on the fire alarm system. Where he's supposed to be working on the fire alarm system. It's supposed to be completed, I believe, by the spring break. It is not. We're still operational and functional to build them, but we're really struggling and they're talking about, we can't find this electronic board. Got them, two of them were bad. And it feels like a lot of excuses, and also could be legitimate things. So, in fact, that was where I was distracted earlier, because I just got an email, copy an email from our construction manager to that contractor, trying to force him to do the work, but it's like squeezing blood from the turnip sometimes. But in any case, they've made a lot of progress there, and it looks like this was an offer to the contractor to say, hey, we'll look for the panel, and if we find it, we'll just back there. So we're trying everything we can to get there. It will get done, and hopefully we'll get done quickly. But these are the things that happen on construction projects. So this one just happens to be happening real time, obviously.
So Rogers HVAC and capital stock was board approved during the March 17th board meeting.
Okay.
AC growth and their NTP was effective April 6th.
Great, thank you. So we don't have a lot. We're trying to do quick updates because we want to really focus on the camp stuff, of course. And so the Winnipeg Court and HVAC were together. Safety and security, not much more to update than what Kevin has talked about last time. They're still moving forward. No major issues to report on that. Samuel High update. Barbara, are you?
Yeah, I have,
Wonderful. So, thank you. So we're getting the San Jose update from Barbara on exploration.
Okay, so for exploration and then goal gym for site prep, Alan has told me that all demo with the exception of south gym is complete. All shoring is installed and bulk excavation is also complete. And that takes a long time because we're trying to keep a balanced site, so they have to take dirt from here and here. And so that's been taking a while. The plans are submitted and have been submitted for almost a year now to DSA. We received back check comments in November 21, but then we went into value engineering and we had to submit another set of back check comments. Right now, we're reviewing what we hope are the final back check comments with DSA. We've been meeting with them every week.
I mean, last week, Barbara, we had
Many hours.
12 hours in meetings probably.
Many hours.
It's a little frustrating. I mean, Barbara and I were on, not the entire time, and maybe kind of tag teaming some of it, but it's a little frustrating because you sit there and at one point I thought my phone died, or I lost connection, because there was silence for, it had to be 6 minutes. Silence. But what was happening is, and this was a little frustrating, but at the same time it was positive progress. So what was happening is the DSA reviewer was reviewing it while everyone else was sitting on this meeting, you know, team, like Zoom, was doing his review while we were sitting there. So the frustrating thing is you're wasting a lot of people's time. But the review was getting done.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know, I'll sit here all day.
Yeah.
And I did.
They were answering questions in real time.
Absolutely. So the reviewer would say, well, you know, what about this? And the architect would have the answer, or he would say, my structural is going to be on in 10 minutes. Ask that again when he gets here. And so they made, I think we made great progress. Sitting in those meetings was frustrating, but looking back on them, I actually think it was really a positive thing because we got a review that we otherwise weren't getting. So we feel like we were pretty close.
It's better than getting just notes on the drawing because you can then discuss the issue with them. So we anticipate having final approval about mid-May.
Yeah, and by the way, on a lot of the issues, the design reviewer, the reviewer would say, oh, okay, that's a satisfactory answer. I'm going to strike my comment.
Right.
So they weren't just like getting answers, they were actually resolving it. And it was a back check, it was also a design review at the same time. Anyway, it worked out really well. And we're hoping that comment will work well.
Right, because then they have to go back and on the drawings they have to take off their notes, make the corrections, and so it takes them a few weeks to present to their reviewers. And so we're anticipating the final, hopefully, at which time we will begin construction.
As soon as we get, I mean, we've awarded the contract, so as soon as we can get permitted, we're going to be built. I mean, that's slightly overstated, but it will be very quick. So that's good. We're on track for hopefully May. Beginning construction.
And I have a few more things with regard to that. So McCarthy was awarded the GMP in March 22nd, coordinating. And they've had some small previous awards which were included in the GMP approval items, like steel,
Some electrical panel equipment.
because they're very well made. We anticipate a 24-month construction period with the final sign-off in May 2024. That's with final sign-off, not just temporary. There's been landscape between the business and history building, which is completed and open at this time. And that landscaping included the trees from the nursery, and we're very proud to say that all the trees in the nursery have been used. The ones that were grown.
And new stock of trees are coming in and growing for the next project.
So we have 86 new 48-gallon trees that have been purchased for the next phase, and the nursery is going to be expanded to the area, so from the corner of 4th and all the way through 4th along 4th Street in that strip of land. So we'll be putting the trees there.
That's awesome. That's way better than I hoped for when we started. So I'm super excited about that. That's good.
And they'll be planted in the spring of 2024 before construction is completed. The contracts are awarded for inspector of record, laboratory of record, materials, and special inspections for the steel fabrication, I guess, comparison. And currently the team is working through, so in addition to going through the DSA process, the construction and architects are working through our RFIs and shop drawings and submittals, doing the scheduling right now, getting ready to start the project. And we are also in the FF&E procurement process right now as well.
Thank you.
On track.
So now I think we get to the meat of the meeting. I think, probably Barbara and Michael can lead up the recap and then Carrie will have something to say, and then we'll get into the update on design.
So I can start with, we had a community meeting. This is the community meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So we had community meetings for Adams on February 28th, and at that, we had a meeting in this space. We had a pretty good turnout, and we had a historical consultant speak, and the architects spoke and showed renderings and drawings of the first projects and 4 phases of anticipated in campus plan. And the tour, we had, I think, we had very good feedback. We really didn't have a lot of negative feedback, but negative feedback. In all the projects, but some of the questions were, we told people that the construction was going to be started, and I can talk to you about it in the next point about what we anticipate construction started and completion. People asked about what's happening to old trees, what size trees we'll be putting in, how we're going to be coordinating with the principal. These are all things we do with all of our projects. But there were no specific questions or comments.
Are people generally okay with, doing just a small project first?
They were, and there was a concern about, and we don't have design it out yet, about where would the library be when we go to the library. And we will work that out with Steve Richardson. He's been amazingly accommodating to us with all our projects, so we have no doubt. Oh, and then for Franklin, we had a community meeting on March 8th. And the recordings of these meetings are on the SMMUSD RFP website. That was, again, another very positive meeting. I tour some of the people there. There was some concern by the people who attended about, the construction in the center of campus and the field construction, and we're working out the time frame for and the phasing for the field and the makerspace building. There was also people I think didn't understand that much what a makerspace is, and we were able to explain to them. The teachers were actually also able to come in and talk about how a makerspace is not unlike a space like this. It's very flexible, can be used for many different things. It's also a space that can be used as a director space, and can be used for art, science, music, whatever. And it's been very, very positively received by the Franklin community and Franklin staff and administration.
So then, Franklin is a challenging campus.
Yes,
We know that because of where we're going to be building the project. But I think one of the things I got out of that meeting is that we probably need to collectively do it. And we may start with our architects helping us define this, but do a better job of communicating what it is. A makerspace. And it sounds catchy and things like, I was thinking about this up before somebody did. Yeah, it sounds really cool. Tell me what it is. And I think we've done that now, and I do think that the teachers were very effective at talking about the value of that space for them, for their teaching, for their students. And honestly, they're better messengers than we are. As they should. A parent wants to hear from the teacher. They don't want to hear. But I think that we're going to be working, we as a department, are going to be working on ways to communicate that type of stuff more effectively. Not just saying it, but getting it out there so that people understand what we're talking about when we say things like a makerspace. And I think that was you brought it up, it's a great example of a thing that we talked about, and we just kind of like, yeah, it's good. But for somebody who's hearing it the first time, maybe it's good. So anyway, that's something we'll be working towards communicating that.
Seems like, because teachers a lot of credibility. And I think, for parents, it's really reassuring to hear from teachers about how, what their needs are. And more so, than
Yeah, oh, I agree.
you're,
I'll be the first to say it, I'm not sure I
yeah.
missed it.
So I think that's a really good takeaway going forward and, involving certainly community settings, having the teacher, the principal.
Teacher and principal, and the principals also all did a really good job. And you're right, they're principals, right? But we had, I think it was Franklin, had 3 teachers who spoke, right? And I think they did a really good job connecting with the community members that were there and conveying the message better than we did.
So another question, and I'll just read this that I haven't taken from the notes, was what will the district do with the contractor that doesn't abide by the terms of the contract? Well, we have in some of our new projects, not with the renovation projects, we are looking at a different type of procurement process, which is what we had here with this lease back, and we have much more control over the contract, and we have a higher quality contractor if we go that way.
Yeah.
So that's,
Especially we have much more control over selecting.
that's correct.
But that is what we've done in our bigger projects, and I think we talked about a way to package these where we can get that high quality contractor to do maybe several of these projects. Although some of them are big enough to do that, to this side, almost, but they will, I think we've come up with a plan to get us to getting good quality.
And lastly, there is a community meeting scheduled for April 26th for Roosevelt. I hope everybody can attend, and that is really to look at the historic district on the Roosevelt campus and get people's opinions about priorities and also hear from the principal and the teachers about their priorities for education. That's at that campus.
Yeah, we have one on the 25th at Lincoln and one on the 26th. They're going to be a little different than the other community meetings that we've had because we went into those coming out of the previous community meetings and all the site meetings and everything with those 5 campuses. We had a pretty good idea where we were going. And we sort of had a good idea how they would encounter or work with the potential historic resources. With Roosevelt, we don't know where we are. I mean, in some ways, the potential historic resources were more significant than one was anticipated. And also, that's a really tight and small campus. So we're not really sure which way to go. I mean, it has a large number, it's 46% the size of what it should be for the enrollment. So it's already so tight. And so we're going to have to really take a look at where we're going. So what will happen at that meeting is we're actually having the architects present 5 different schemes, 5 different master plans, moving from preserve everything, which shows how we're not making our educational needs and how we'll be eating up a lot of recreational space, but we preserve everything. To, on the far end, we go back to the master plan we developed, which tears down practically everything and gives us all of those things, but it's a long process and it's a big, long building process to meet all the educational and recreational needs. And then we have 3 steps in the middle. And we really are interested in what people want to prioritize and how they want to really look at what the priorities are. We do think, with a historic district, we think we can maintain and retain the qualities of the historic district without preserving 8 of the buildings. So it's a question of how many buildings sort of help you feel like you've retained the historic nature and quality in the district, and still at the same time meet our educational and not eat up all the recreation space. So it's a real conundrum. And so it's going to be an interesting meeting because it's going to be much more about taking in people's thoughts and sort of gathering that. And then we're going to come back to you all with that, with what comes out of that meeting and say, well, here's where we think we might go and here's where we think that the campus plan wants to head. And we're going to want your opinion, and we'll also go to the board facilities subcommittee. Sometime late May, early June, it depends on how well we can time it out, we will go back, at least on the 5 campuses, we've already done the community meetings, and get the board to say, go ahead with the campus plans as we have them. And that go-ahead is mostly for our CEQA purposes, because we have to have a defined CEQA goal. And so that's there. If we can make it, I'd like to also to have them say at that moment where we are with Roosevelt. Lincoln is very similar. We don't have any SMS projects planned for Lincoln. I will say with Roosevelt, with pretty much every scheme, the SMS project that we planned, which is to put the early childhood back in the back corner, is still most likely. So it sort of stays there. So then the next problem is we've taken so long making these decisions, we don't really have enough money to build it, but we're working through that. At least not in the SMS bond. I'm still saying potentially because the board has not said that out loud.
I understand, but that's where we're,
That's where we're probably having here. With Lincoln, it's a whole nother question. It's really what are the priorities are going to be. And so that's also one where we're going to show a number of different schemes, a number of different ideas, and a lot of components of also which is the most important to prioritize. For the order, yeah. How to phase it. Whether or not, the existing pool is down. Bringing that pool building back to life is, well, it's very expensive, and the vision of state architects would tell us don't do it. So the next step is, if we're going to have a pool on that campus, and that is an if we need to answer, then it most likely will be an outdoor pool on the back corner, the northeast corner, where the tennis courts are, the parking tennis courts. That's what makes most sense, and then we would rebuild a new locker room facility, and then eventually build a gym. But is that the priority? Is that the need? And we know that we need some classrooms, and certainly the 300s building is not functioning, so there's a plan for the 300s building. The music building needs help. The shops building is, we put off putting air conditioning in that building because we didn't know what we were going to do with it, and whatever we were going to do was going to be substantial. So there's a lot of questions as far as what comes first and what the order is at Lincoln. Meeting with teachers and the site committee has not provided significant clarity to say, there's a lot of cross purposes and things beginning. So it'll be interesting where we go.
Okay. I'm curious, are you going to format these two differently in terms of getting kind of groups, breaking into groups to discuss options and that? But it sounds like you want this to be more interactive.
Yeah, it is. Well, we're going to do a little less time touring. There's not as much to discuss on the historic with Lincoln. Nothing was designated as potential historic there. We are definitely looking for more scoring and voting, and sort of people to put their opinions down, little dots and things on paper and things like that. And it's like we're really going to be encouraging more of an input and comments and discussion for both of those.
Obviously, we'd love to have all of you there, but I think the other part of what Carrie mentioned is, this is going to come back to you. And then once we get that input, we'll come back to you and say, here's what we heard. Here's some ideas, let's talk.
So where we go with the goal of that is that unless something drastically, crazily changes, we're not going out for a bond in 22. We're aiming towards 24. And with that, though, we do have some funds that we can access to do some design work. And so the goal would be on all of these is to say, okay, so here's what the first projects coming out of the next bond would be, and we go ahead and spend money designing those and getting those shovel ready so they can be constructed in 25. And we do think Lincoln is going to be in that. So we need to figure out what the first step is at Lincoln. What the first, where we are with Roosevelt as far as getting that one ready. We have some ideas of what first steps are at the other campuses, but we need to determine how much money we have to do what first steps and what's the order. And even with that, all of the projects that we would like to have will not fit into the next bond. So,
Karen, a question for you. You mentioned the Roosevelt side being so very tight with regard to the size versus the school enrollment. So what is the justification for carving out some of that space for preschool?
it's not for preschool. So we will not have a preschool on the campus. It will be transitional kindergarten, which we're now required to have, and kindergarten.
And so is TK required on every campus?
It's not required on every campus, but it's required that we make it available for all 4-year-olds. And by 2025, all 4-year-olds are allowed, and it looks like there's a very good chance that kindergarten will become required sometime between now and then. Right now it's optional. Kindergarten is optional. About 95% of people will avail themselves of it, but some people choose not to send their kid to kindergarten. Yeah.
Because no parents say, I'll go.
Educationally and community, we think it is better to have the kids go ahead and enter the pathway at their elementary school, at their local elementary school. So we're not required to have TK in every school, but if we do it based on available space, then all of the kids in the north section of town would have to go to the south side to go to transitional kindergarten. That's not.
It builds character.
It does, but some folks won't appreciate it.
Especially
Another
kid
question.
in TK and an older kid, sorry.
Another question I have, just generally, because it sounds to me as though the Roosevelt campus is the most enrollment intensive in relation to its physical footprint.
Yes.
I'm sure you've addressed this, but it's from information. Any thought about redrawing the boundaries so that some of that congestion goes to other?
It is occasionally mentioned. I will tell you, and I glance at Jane before I say this, but I will tell you that for school board members, it's considered a third rate. It is something you do not want to do. People moved into that neighborhood to have their kids go to that school, and suddenly changing it and saying now your kid can't go to that school is a political firestorm. So it is not something that we would likely do. That doesn't mean we won't do it. And if we decide to preserve all of Roosevelt, then we should really be talking about reducing that population down to more like 500 students. And to do that would potentially require redistricting, but that's part of the decision that's all part of the balanced decision that has to be made.
How many people are there?
We're now around 700. We were topping off at 800 4 years ago, and we're down a little bit. If we see the projected changes with TK, we might get around 625 in the next 5 to 10 years.
Meaning if the normal trends continue what they're expecting.
Yeah, later they're expecting.
And then I just have one last question, because there's no land, nothing's left in San Juan, and you can't say, well, let's just set me on real quick. How is the old Madison school side, Arizona, is that all college now?
It's leased to the college.
It's leased to the college?
Yes.
Services.
We try not to sell it.
Good, okay.
No, it is leased to the college, and currently their lease goes through 2054, and they would like to extend their
Oh my
lease.
God.
Well, it's getting close.
You can always do an early termination.
I'm asking because
It's not pretty.
that could clearly release, that sort of enrollment pressure, you have a smaller campus there, but you have a school, like a district of their own, some of this. I'm probably trying out ideas that have been hashed over or rejected a long time ago, but sometimes it's worth, providing ideas that aren't on the table.
So all these people, all these new buildings that we know in the core, I mean, I know that there are a lot of young, senior professionals, but, people will have kids and they might stay in those apartments even though they don't think they're going to. Where do those kids go to Roosevelt now? So all these new buildings we see in downtown, is that where they go?
A lot of that is in the Roosevelt range. I mean,
So south of Wilshire. Right?
south of Roosevelt, down to about Santa Monica. And then I think from Santa Monica south it goes to Muir. Yeah. I don't have that line in my head exactly.
No, I think it's worth
South of
thinking.
Wilshire, uptown Wilshire goes to Kinley.
Over, if you go over, it depends on how, but that starts,
22nd Street or something, I don't know.
yeah, no, it starts before that. It's like, I don't remember.
That's all Kinley, south of Wilshire, from Wilshire out.
I think it's a great idea, maybe we focus on the density, but I mean, given the density that's happening.
It's not gonna, I mean, that lease is, any of those leases are 66-year leases statewide.
Yeah, but I mean, SMC, I'm a voter. They got a lot of things they want from voters list. I'm just saying, when you have a list, they got their list, I guarantee it. Nothing, I mean, I understand there's a lease, but I've done many lease terminations and things change. They could relocate that facility somewhere else, They said they were a good partner, didn't they?
They built the theater too. They've done all the improvements, actually. And it happened at a time that happened in the early 90s.
It's not nothing bad that happened. I mean, things change, and circumstances change. And I'm just saying, it's like you put it on an issue list. I'm sure they have plans. And because when you look at that density downtown, I really believe it's when you look at housing prices. You think you're going to move into an apartment and you're going to be there 3 years, and then you get married and you have a kid. Like, oh my gosh, I don't have $2 million to buy a house. So there might be something happen, right? There's all sorts of people who have kids in apartments.
Fourth in Arizona, empty property, that's cool.
I'm just saying, play monopoly. Probably, I just want to term it probably makes sense to have a school in the core.
Those are all.
Can I ask you a question on Lincoln?
Michael.
About the pool? The equality concept that I like to bring out north and south. So obviously there's no pool here.
Correct.
So the historical reason was what? So they have a pool, this campus doesn't have a change?
This campus has the access to the swim center, right over there.
Yeah, so these, the kids who want to swim,
That's where they go. And,
Do they go?
from here, from Jams, they go to the swim center. Right now, they are not, even before we closed the pool, they stopped swimming at Lincoln. That was more of a conflict with teachers, the physical education teachers.
Middle school.
Okay.
But they did it, so there was like the staff, yes, who wanted to do it.
Wasn't it cool, municipal pool?
Yeah, no, Lincoln was always used in, and that's one of the reasons to bring it back is there's a real desire, for the community benefit. I don't know. I mean, I have an opinion that, if you're going to live adjacent to the beach, every student should have the opportunity to learn to swim. And should be, but that's an opinion that I hold,
Yeah, and then where do they do it? Right?
And where do they do it, and how do they do it, and how do they have enough access to do it? And, the pool we built at Sam High is a great swimming pool, but it is a community pool. It's not a teach you to swim pool. It was not built as it was built as a more competition pool, not as a
Bringing up items, the historical courtyard, the spacing between the fingers of the finger buildings, which we're not doing right now, but will be done. And renderings were shown to show that, so people were excited about more outside education and interior versus exterior learning. And of course, the issue of historical context is a big one at that site. Of course, the new building is on the edge of the site, but still needs to incorporate the means and methods or the contextuality of the original buildings. So, issues of windows and location came up, and we are working with the architects and the historical architects on developing that a little further. So it's tough with anything, including right here. We have a building right across the way here from the 50s and 40s, and this building. So we're constantly trying to deal with issues of fenestration and to make, to see how we're going to make the older buildings make the newer buildings. So that's going to continue on all of these projects. For the most part, Will Rogers, that was pretty much the main issues with Will Rogers. People wanted to see some more trees in the plants, which we could probably do. There's issues with site planning. How do we make a new play field where we currently have one, so we're trying to work on how can we get it maybe going a little earlier so the kids come back to the play field because we're putting a new play field in a new location. So, it's a bit of logistics with Will Rogers, but overall comments were pretty positive. The same is true with McKinley. Thank you for getting rid of the portables, was the number one comment. There were some questions about the drop-off and pick-up and drop-off, meaning some people felt we might need a fence between the drop-off and the actual drive lane, which is something to be considered. People like, again, the same things. The same themes been coming up. We really enjoy the exterior learning areas. McKinley has a nice new courtyard between the new building and the existing building, which will be used for exterior learning. And finally, the issue of historical context is a big one there, because of course we're building a two-story building on pretty much in front of one of the sides of McKinley, and I think some people felt it may move too modern, move too massive. So we discussed that with the architects, and they're currently working on that to see if we can kind of bring down the scale a bit and pretty much how we can make that feel a little lighter and a little more plain ball, would be more of the original building. We are actually going to add the library to that project. We're going to take the existing large classrooms where it is and turn them into the library. So that's another project that's been slowly added on. And that project was given to Johnson Borough because it's right next door. It makes sense. So there's a slight change in that project. And finally, the last meeting we had, one of the meetings, I don't know when it fell in, but was Grant. Of course, Grant is a smaller project that's renovating the existing library. Most comments were positive. I think the biggest issue that came up, it is a very larger scale operation than it is right now. We're actually using these exterior courtyards and going beyond them to adjacent spaces. So it's a wonderful design, but I think people feel like the librarian might have trouble controlling it. So the architects had to show how the librarians, teachers can actually see through all the glazing and keep an eye on all the kids because it's kind of expanded its boundaries. But essentially, we've not created any new structures outside. We're using existing buildings all the time. Some people were concerned about the alleyway behind it, which we're covering with fences and shrubs, so it shouldn't be an issue. And aside from that, of course, we're working with the historical architects. That is one building that is historical that we are doing work on. We are cutting holes in the walls. And of course, we're concerned about historic context, structure, integrity. So that's the only one we're really kind of going into and really chopping on, so to speak. People are concerned about the glass sliding doors. We want to make sure the sliding doors, not quite as big as this, but they have context to the original buildings. Because that one is a really beautiful 1940s, great design. It's one of my favorites. So everyone's trying to be careful to make sure that it's plain ball with the original. And there were some other comments on future work. We had renderings of the new building in the back. People love the second. Some people love the second floor garden. Some people felt it was a little big. So of course that'll be massaged later as we continue with that project in the future. It's not part of the phase 1 projects. But for the most part,
you said something about it a little big. Nobody was actually.
No, some people felt, well, basically, the second story is a garden, essentially, but there's an elevator tower and some stairs. So there's some structure on the second floor, a little bit of structure. But no one's opposed to it. And they love the idea of changing the court, the play field to a square or rectangle, because right now it's a strange kind of shape. Of course, we improved the parking, we improved the pick up and drop off. Little kids are now from the back of the school to the front of the school. So a lot of good things happen at Grant. There weren't quite giant building projects, just a lot of infrastructure that makes the campus a little more workable and a whole lot better. And of course, the portables are gone. So we made it pretty happy.
Actually, just on the Grant, you said the alley, what was the concern about the alley?
Just proximity to kids in the alley. It's never a great marriage.
There's some characters that go that way. I had 5 mothers who PTA people at my house yesterday for lunch. So, anyway, there's a lot of people in that neighborhood that are active about Grant. And they, there's been a lot of security type stuff in Sunset Park, I would say. So, anyway, that's how I was curious.
Well, right now the little kids are right up against that alley. So now we're going to move to the front of the school. So that's better. And I think overall, I think a lot of the, one of the major moves I've seen in all the projects, we're trying to get the building along alleys to act as a security device rather than a fence. Instead of fence-based building, it's building on the edge, so getting rid of the alley, so to speak, kind of closing down that corridor.
Building becomes the perimeter.
Yeah, building is the perimeter, and we're doing that at Malibu High School and many other sites too.
Now, you close that out during the day, don't you?
Who is that?
Which one?
Grant?
Grant? Which I think.
Grant Alley is open, the Franklin.
It's only Franklin?
Yeah, only the section of Franklin.
Okay.
Yeah, and not all of Franklin.
Right, it's that last section.
Yeah.
Do people like the front? Because I know first it was just a concrete wall, then there was an additional metal fencing, now there's like increased height on the front. So were people positive about
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
The fact that it had just been finished before.
It's painted in the morning.
Painted in the morning.
No, not quite that.
Oh.
But no, yeah, that actually worked out better than I expected. Because of course we reviewed the drawings and worked with the architect on that, but it came out great. It worked really well with the windows and.
Yeah, aesthetically, I think it looks.
Yeah,
It is a, I'm biased, that was my kids. It's a beautiful WPA building, and I think it fits in the neighborhood. It's a real neighborhood school. So.
Yeah, the two great benefits though of that taller wall is, one of them is it does give us a much harder perimeter, which for safety and security helps. The other thing is that, kids would have to go in and out of the security perimeter to get to the front office or to the auditorium because of the interior gates. So all those interior gates can now come down. So the kids are all within it was not an easy decision, but it feels like it does solve some real challenges.
Yeah, I mean, and as gates and fences, it's not me. It looks good.
Right, you gotta have them.
I was watching, because I was walking the dog, watching go up.
Yeah, you gotta see the progress.
So I had a question for the Rogers and McKinley, where there's questions about the historical context. Are you planning to go back to those schools or let them know, as designs are finalized in terms of the historical consultants and the architects to get back to the school?
Yeah, we'll go back to the site committees and the faculties and go back and say, okay, so here's a little change, a little bit of adaptation, and let them know. And we do that through our design process because, from schematic to design development, things do change. We try to keep bringing people along the way so they can see, the way the changes are.
And we told them it was, those renderings were not in stone because it was schematic design, so they were expecting changes.
One thing I want to just because we're meeting, and I'll come back to you probably for a more formal decision on this later. We're moving a couple of fields. So like the Franklin field is going to be moved and put into a new shape. The Rogers field is going to move and put into a new shape. Eventually, Grant and Roosevelt and McKinley will all move. And I've pretty steadfastly held to our district standard of keeping grass on the elementary school fields. But this is the moment, if we were going to go to synthetic on the elementary school fields, this would be the moment to do it. And I was reminded by the fact that at Franklin, particularly, Rogers is a little bit better, but at Franklin, we have a really hard time keeping grass on the field. I think if everyone has an option between grass and synthetic grass, particularly for elementary kids, grass would win. But when we're comparing partial grass and mud and hard as rock dirt to a synthetic turf field, there's a little more of a conversation. So what do you think?
Didn't you say, wait, I'm confused. This is, okay, the field that you're talking about, you have a difficult time keeping grass on. Is it moving or is it not moving?
It's still going to probably go to dirt too often. So, yes.
Carrie, question about the water that's used for irrigation for grassy areas. You know, the city is starting to develop a kind of gray water infrastructure. And there's discussion, I don't know where that planning is, but I'm wondering if there is any way for the district to try to get some priority attention from the city for the gray water system. That maybe there is a social and cultural and educational priority for the grassy fields at schools, you know, to remain grassy and to remain healthy, but using gray water. Are there any obstacles to that? I mean,
if you go back 2 or 3 years, Division of State Architects was not in a place to use gray water. And so they have recently come on board, but they're still very new. I mean,
Edison has a stormwater retention.
Yeah, we have our own stormwater retention.
We don't use that for irrigation?
We do, it's stormwater, not gray water.
Yeah.
But yes, we do.
Right, I don't know if that's what you meant.
well, you know, that, I mean, more generally, yes, there's stormwater recapture and or.
Yeah, gray water is
Gray water is
it's
different.
just, yeah, and I don't know what the city could do, but I think the issue is, and it's a tough one, it really is about usage. You know, if we were to maintain grass fields, we would have to restrict the usage. We have to, everybody would be gated, we have to shut it down for extensive periods. Every time it rains, I know, you know, and it's not only kids, it's adults too. They get on the fields in the rain, they play ball, and once you lose the grass, the turf, you've lost it until you resod it, you know, reseed it, regrow it. So it's, unless we become police about its usage, almost in the way that we do with the turf, ironically with the synthetic fields. They're under strict control, you have to have permits to use them, nobody comes on them and does anything.
I mean, I guess what, I know that you meet regularly, I assume you still meet regularly with the city.
Yes.
So they've been, I mean, I just remember hearing from Karen about just, you know, issues with synthetic fields also, just safety issue, I mean, just that.
A lot of that is passed. A lot of that was bad science.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, you can still go today and read everything horrible about synthetic turf, and there's been so many studies that debunk all of that, including the rubber pellets. But we moved away from the rubber pellets.
Right,
you know, we've gone to cork. If for no other reason than, you know, it really was hard for us to keep every pellet on our field and not in the ocean.
But on the other hand, they have to be replaced every 7 to 10 years.
Yeah, that's right.
At roughly 100,000 a field.
Not quite. It depends on the size.
It will be by that time.
Yeah.
Well, like, I mean, Kansas is a part of the field, right? It's not just.
Right.
So that's.
Yeah, Rogers Field might be 50,000. It's a very tough issue. The grass is great to have. It just depends on uses. And maybe, I don't, you know, Franklin, like, I think the Rogers Field is, do we lose the turf there too? Does it get pretty decimated?
It's doing a little bit better right now. You know, Grant is spotty.
Always have been.
It always has been.
I don't know if that's the maintenance, and I guess we,
It's a little bit.
West, I like grass, of course, but yes, it's a lot of work to keep it.
Yeah.
I just think though that so much of us lives in a concrete, in this concrete world. When do kids actually get to touch dirt?
Right.
Maybe that's okay. You know, maybe, I just think it's so valuable to have someone that's real and that's, you play on it. Yes, it's maybe dirt and it may not, it may require more work, but if you put down synthetic, you'll never go back to dirt. And
Right.
how many kids don't ever get to leave this? If they don't, to me, these kids may not get the opportunity to go out in nature and actually touch dirt and see, you know, other than what they have in their community. If you take that away from them, then they will never get that access to that.
The water use issue. You know, how do we evaluate, or we should evaluate, what it would take to have new fields and irrigation systems and how much water and what can we, you know, do pure water wise before decisions made.
I
Because
think we just wanted to start the conversation.
Yeah,
We just want to get like this. I think this is precisely what we're looking at.
I certainly would support any rethinking about how we can maintain our grass, our turf. And it probably boils down to maybe different approaches to water use. I don't know. But I think especially for elementary campuses, it just seems essential.
I mean, what we've already done is we have, you know, we have smart sensors on all of our fields. So we have the best technology on when we're using irrigation systems and how they're used. I mean, those have only come in the last 3 years and really operational the last 2. So we're getting a much better management of the water usage, but we're still seeing challenges. And you know, when you go to a principal and say, okay, we need to rest your field, so you need to stay off the field for the 4 weeks, you know, of December. It's not a pleasant conversation in the community, you know, and the parents and everybody doesn't like that. But that's really what we would need to do is we need to rest those fields. The time to really rest the fields is sometime in the fall or the winter. It doesn't actually do us much good to rest them as much in the summer. And even the field maintenance time that we have time for maintenance is in the summer, but that's not, you know, our fields are relatively dormant, not as bad as here inland farther, but they're relatively dormant in the summer. So we have, I don't know, I've looked at this many times, and until like 3 weeks ago I would have said, our fields are going to stay grass, no questions. But I'm just this is the moment to entertain the question.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and so, you have to look at it, like, what a yearly cycle would be, and what the water usage, and when it would have to be shut down, and what it needs, and I think the schools would have to buy into whatever, is decided.
And the communities too, because
Because, we do have community use on our fields, and so you can't, bring food or picnic, synthetic turf.
If you're bring water. 26 acres. And, you know, and it's just hard for them to maintain it. So,
It's getting enough air, like these new trees, the area you put in now has grass around it, so it's gonna get just regular watering. But a lot of these trees that are just installed in areas with a lot of cement in them, are not getting water.
not getting water. And we have to do a lot
Established.
of hand watering now to get them established. And then even then,
That's very late.
our groundwater question is,
Yeah.
you know.
so the new trees at Salmon don't have a irrigation.
No, they do.
They do.
I mean, part of it's built in.
But in places that we put trees in at Roosevelt, and I went through 5 years, and the first 3 years, and watered those trees every single weekend.
Yes.
Big buckets from the hose and drag them over, and it was easy, and there were 5 of them. Trees. So it is,
And we're happy about those trees.
Yeah.
But that's what it takes, you know.
They rooted, yeah, until they rooted.
So,
And we should, look at the buffer, we should continue to our last agenda.
Oh, yes.
Unless, we wanted to talk about that earlier in the meeting. middle and elementary school project design phase.
Okay, I can start as sort of a follow-up to what we were just talking about in the reviews. For Adams, the project is a design development that is expected to be submitted to DSA in this coming September. The architects are currently collaborating with the historical consultants. Estimated DSA, this is a small project, it's been about 3 months, and estimated approval is in January 23. That project is expected to go into construction in June after school ends because we can't go before. And we will work with the principal to relocate the library for that year. So it's a 10-month approximate construction time. And also with regard to, in the meantime, alongside of working with the architects, we are meeting with the CEQA consultants, and we are expecting, the CEQA consultants for James's asset, and we're expecting to receive an MMD, getting an index in September 22. So that's on track for the campus plan for Adams. For Franklin, again, we're in design development, and we expect to submit to DSA in October. So all the projects are actually going in the fall. And again, they're collaborating with the historical consultants at ARG. Estimated DSA duration for Franklin is about 4 to 6 months. Construction is expected to start in June 23. So you'll see the projects are all expected to start next summer. That construction is longer duration. That's about a 15-month duration. CEQA is expected to, it's an MMD, and we expect to have that in September 22. The CEQA consultant is Baker. For Roosevelt, we expect to have an EIR, and we don't have a project yet, so we don't know when that's started.
Just setting aside Roosevelt, each of the architects, if I remember correctly, and probably this can apply to you too, Michael, each of the architects in the last week or two have confirmed we're on schedule for these.
Absolutely, they've confirmed it, yes. They've confirmed the DSA submission, and they're ready. They'll be ready.
I'm assuming it's the same answer all you.
October, November for all DSA, so those, and CEQA, similar to ours. Spring 23, sorry, McKinley, an NMD for late October, Grant, an EIR for spring 2023, and Rogers, an NMD in late October. Those are what we had, those 2 projects.
Barbara, could you post that schedule or send it to the committee?
I can,
I couldn't take notes fast enough, but it was very informative.
so maybe we can put it in the minutes.
I'll make sure that that. So Grant needs an EIR because, and the others who did
The main thing with Grant is we are looking at removing one of the potential historic contributors to the district, and potentially it could be considered a primary, but to do what we need to do on the campus, so we want to make sure we're covering the bases on that more fully, where with the others, where we're able to do the MMDs, mitigating negative declarations, they're all ones where we're not touching any historic, or do we think, if it was not for the historic, we probably could do categorical exemptions on all campuses.
Right.
Including Grant.
Including Grant. But, you know, we always do more when it comes to CEQA because of the community input.
Anything else on architects? Okay, so this is one, Margaret, you had a question earlier on design for the timeline.
No.
Has it been answered?
Yeah, well, yes, I think Barbara's report was.
I mean, it's been answered, but you didn't try. Yeah, so
I
we'll
haven't
get
heard
this.
that.
So we'll get you.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Carrie, anything else you wanted to?
Actually, you want to talk about, we do need to, if you want.
Yeah, I just thought we could pick up on a suggestion that was made at the last meeting about some review or training with regard to the ed specs.
Right. So we were, I mean, I think we were thinking it'd be great to have somebody from Ed Services there they're probably going to have the hardest schedule to meet, or has that changed?
No, it's always true, but it's good that we're later in the day, so it has a better potential of finding someone.
Cool. Do you think we would look at the bond or Dr. Mora?
Let's see if we can get Dr. Moore.
Okay. Do we want to set maybe a couple potential? The reason I'm bringing that up is because if we pick a date, we go talk to Dr. Morrison, and say, I'm not available. So we might, maybe we talk about a range, like, you know, what do we know, early April? Mid to late April. So I think then the next question, and this is again a Carrie question, for ed services, is that time leading up to the end of the school year a bad time typically?
Not worse than any other time.
Okay. Better than leading up to the beginning of school.
Correct. Start of school is the one that's.
Okay, so could we look at something like early June? Sometime in...
I would say if we can for this, let's see if we can do this later in May.
Okay.
Only because once you get back from Memorial Day, it's a sprint to the end where everybody's involved in schools. So I would say the 16th and the 23rd are potentials. Because the 30th is Memorial Day, and after that, it's just crazy. May 16th and 23rd will be our first choices, and then those that work will go back.
So the other thing is, although we typically do meet on Monday, we are not obligated. So what we'll do is we'll set that time range, and then see if we can get Dr. Moore to be there. Well, yeah, I mean, or it could be someone else from.
If we can't get her, then I'll see about getting Bertha or Susan or one of them, some of the others who are involved.
It's just that I think it would be great for you guys to hear from them, rather than us, to talk about this. So we can move on. Cool. So we will shoot for that week.
Let's meet tomorrow. Or maybe you can reach out to him.
Done.
All right, great.
Well, that would be a pretty full agenda then, would it not? Section of
That will mostly complete.
Yeah.
We'll still do some updates. You know, just the things that are happening. Hopefully we'll be able to tell you we got the SDA approval, we're starting construction.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not gonna hold it for that. But the bulk of it would be that. We're done.
And then some
Well, I think it might be a good idea for that one.
It's so much better.
I like it.
What do you
To meet in
Meeting in
person.
person.
Oh, yes, yes. What I was going to ask is that the design subcommittee, after these other two steps happen, when would you be expecting that we'd be seeing the results of that?
I'm hoping beginning of May.
Beginning of May.
Hoping that they'll have something. I mean, we'll check with the architects and see what we'll do. But I'm hoping beginning of May.
You were very, very good.